If you are ever driving alone on a deserted American highway after midnight, and you get the strange feeling that the road is watching you, that the darkness on either side is leaning closer with every mile, you should understand this clearly. Some roads do not exist to take you home. They exist to take something from you. And Jack Wilson learned this the hard way on Highway 66 at exactly 2:47 a.m., a time that felt frozen, unnatural, as if the night itself had stopped breathing. Jack was a seasoned truck driver, 32 years old, thousands of miles behind him. The kind of man who had driven through storms, deserts, and snow without fear. But that night was different, because the highway was empty in a way that didn't feel normal. No headlights in distance, no engine sounds, no radio signal, just the low hum of the truck and the endless yellow line sliding beneath him like a hypnotic spell. And as the desert stretched out on both sides, pitch black and silent, Jack felt a pressure building in his chest, an unshakable sense that he was not alone even though logic told him otherwise. The clock on the dashboard flickered for a second, then steadied again at 2:47, and that's when he saw her, standing on the shoulder of the road, illuminated suddenly by his headlights as if she had been waiting for that exact moment, a woman in a long white dress, stained with dust and something darker, her hair hanging forward to hide her face, her bare feet inches from the asphalt, completely still, not waving, not signaling, just standing there in a way that made Jack instinctively ease his foot off the accelerator, because no one stood like that on Highway 66 at this hour unless something had gone terribly wrong. Every survival instinct told him to keep driving, to lock his eyes forward and pretend she didn't exist, but something heavier than fear pulled at him. Something like guilt or curiosity, or maybe the road itself tightening its grip, and before he fully understood what he was doing, Jack slowed the truck and rolled down the window, the desert air rushing in cold and sharp, carried with a smell that didn't belong. Burnt metal, old smoke, and decay. He asked if she needed help, his voice sounding weak even to his own ears, and slowly, unnaturally slowly, the woman lifted her head just enough for the headlights to catch her face, or what was left of it, because her skin looked pale and stretched, her lips cracked and blackened, and where her eyes should have been there was only darkness, deep and endless, like holes punched through reality, and Jack's heart slammed against his ribs as he realized he could not see the whites of her eyes, not even a reflection, just empty black staring back at him. Yet somehow, against all reason, he unlocked the door. She did not walk to the truck. She appeared beside it, the door opening without a sound, her presence filling the cab with an unbearable cold that crawled across Jack's skin, raising goosebumps along his arms as she sat in the passenger seat without fastening the belt, without a word, her body unnaturally still, her hands folded in her lap, fingers stained dark as if burned, and as Jack pulled back on the highway, telling himself again and again that he was just tired, that this was just another stranded traveler. The road ahead seemed to stretch longer than before, the darkness thicker, the headlights weaker, as if the truck itself was being swallowed by the night. The radio crackled suddenly to life for half a second, static screaming, and beneath it, faint and distorted, Jack thought he heard screaming too, distant and layered, like echoes trapped underwater, before the radio died completely, leaving behind a silence so heavy it felt oppressive. And when Jack risked a glance toward the woman, he noticed something that made his stomach drop. Her reflection did not appear in the window. The glass showed only the desert rushing past, empty and lifeless, and his hands tightened around the steering wheel as his breathing grew shallow, because he realized that since she had entered the truck, he could no longer remember stopping, could no longer remember the exact moment he had opened the door, as if that memory had been erased, scraped away, and replaced with something false. The clock flickered again, 2:47 a.m., still the same time, unmoving, and Jack understood then that the highway was no longer taking him forward. It was holding him in place, dragging him deeper without distance or direction, and as the road curved gently ahead, disappearing into darkness, Jack felt the overwhelming certainty that picking her up was not a mistake. It was an invitation, and Highway 66 had accepted it. The silence inside the truck grew so thick that Jack could hear his own heartbeat thudding in his ears, each pulse louder than the engine, and with every mile the air seemed heavier, colder, pressing down on his lungs as if the cab were slowly being buried underground, while the woman beside him remained completely motionless, not breathing, not blinking, her presence more oppressive than if she had been screaming. And Jack tried to speak again, tried to ask her name, where she was headed, anything to prove she was real. But the word stuck in his throat, because when he turned his head slightly toward her, he noticed that her chest did not rise or fall, and the cold radiating from her was no longer just uncomfortable, it was painful, seeping into his bones, numbing his fingers against the steering wheel. The headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the darkness ahead, and Jack realized the road no longer felt familiar. The signs were missing, the mile markers gone, replaced by endless stretches of cracked asphalt that looked older, more decayed, as if the highway itself had aged decades and minutes. And when he glanced at the rearview mirror out of pure instinct, his blood ran cold, because the passenger seat behind him was empty, no reflection of the woman, no movement, no shadow, just bare upholstery staring back at him. And before he could process it, a breath, icy and intimate, brushed against his ear from the back seat, followed by a voice so low it vibrated, inside his skull rather than reaching his ears, whispering, "You weren't supposed to see me." And Jack screamed, jerking the wheel hard enough that the truck swerved across the lane, tires screeching as he fought to regain control, his mind spinning as he shouted that she needed to get out, that this wasn't funny, that she was sick, drunk, dangerous, anything to make sense of what was happening. But the laughter that answered him was soft, broken, layered with pain, echoing from everywhere and nowhere at once. He slammed his foot onto the brake, panic flooding his system, but the pedals sank uselessly to the floor, offering no resistance, no slowing, only the sickening realization that the truck was still accelerating, the speedometer needle climbing despite his frantic attempts to stop. And outside, the desert began to change, the darkness giving way to shapes that looked like twisted metal and scorched earth, the smell of smoke returning, stronger now, filling the cab until Jack, gagged, his eyes burning as memories that were not his own forced their way into his mind. Flashes of headlights spinning out of control, the sound of metal tearing apart, flames roaring, skin blistering, lungs filling with smoke. And he realized with growing horror that he was seeing the accident, reliving from inside the fire, feeling the agony of being trapped, burned alive, screaming for help that never came, while the voice whispered again, closer now, right behind him, "I died here, but the road didn't let me go." And ahead, emerging from the darkness like a wound in the earth, Jack saw the bridge, old and broken, its guardrails twisted and blackened, as if they had been melted, a single flickering sign hanging crookedly above it, letters glowing an unnatural orange. And oh, return, 1987, and something inside Jack shattered as he remembered the urban legends, the stories truckers told in diners, about Highway 66 swallowing people whole, about drivers who vanished without a trace, their vehicles found days later, burned and empty. And as the truck barreled toward the bridge, Jack tried the radio again, screaming into it for help, but all that came back was static layered with distant screaming, dozens of voices crying out at once, overlapping, begging, accusing, and suddenly the woman was in the passenger seat again, her head slowly turning toward him, her mouth stretching open far wider than humanly possible, revealing charred teeth and a tongue burned black, as she spoke words that crushed the last of his hope. "Someone has to stay," she said calmly, almost gently. "And you stopped." And Jack understood then that this highway did not hunt randomly. It waited for kindness, for hesitation, for that one moment where a driver chose to care. And as the bridge rushed closer, flames burst into life along the sides of the road. Jack felt his body growing heavier, weaker, as if something were pulling him backward, peeling him away from himself. And in the final seconds before the truck slammed into bridge, fire engulfing everything, Jack caught a glimpse of the rearview mirror one last time and saw not his own reflection, but hers, standing on a roadside again, untouched, waiting, while his scream dissolved into the roar of flames and metal, and the highway claimed another soul to keep its balance. Morning came slowly to Highway 66, the kind of weak, gray dawn that didn't feel like a beginning, but an extension of the night. And when the authorities arrived after a passing motorist reported smoke rising from the desert, they found Jack Wilson's truck resting at the edge of the broken bridge, its frame twisted, its paint burned away, the metal still warm despite the fire having died hours earlier. Yet what disturbed them most was not the wreckage itself, but the silence around it, an unnatural stillness that pressed against their ears as if the world were holding its breath. There was no body inside the cab, no blood, no remains, only deep claw marks gouged into the dashboard from the inside, fingernails worn down to bone. as though someone had tried desperately to escape long after escape was impossible, and the smell inside the truck was overwhelming, burnt flesh mixed with cold ash, confusing the investigators because the fire damage did not match the intensity required to produce such a scent. And as they searched the surrounding area, they found something worse. Footprints leading away from the wreck barefoot, scorched into the asphalt, stopping abruptly at the roadside as if whoever had made them had simply vanished into the air. Jack Wilson was officially listed as missing, presumed dead, another tragic highway accident. But the local officers exchanged uneasy glances because this was not the first time they had stood at this exact spot, reading the same reports, filling out the same forms, pretending this road was just asphalt and not something else entirely. Over the following weeks, truckers began talking again, as they always did, sharing stories in low voices at rest stops and diners. Stories about a man seen standing along Highway 66 just before dawn, dressed in scorched white clothing, head hanging low, never waving, never asking for help, just waiting, and those who passed him reported the same strange sensation, a sudden pressure in the chest, a wave of guilt, the overwhelming urge to stop, while those who ignored him later admitted they felt watched for miles afterward, as if something were following just out of sight. One driver claimed he looked into his rearview mirror and saw the man sitting behind him, dripping ash onto the seat, before disappearing when he blinked. Another swore the radio crackled to life near the bridge, whispering a name over and over, Jack, layered beneath screaming static. And though these accounts were dismissed publicly as stress-induced hallucinations, the highway patrol quietly placed new warning signs along that stretch of road, signs that didn't explain anything, only urged drivers not to stop, not to pick up hitchhikers, not to linger. Years passed, yet the accidents never stopped, and the pattern remained the same. Vehicles found abandoned or burned, no bodies, no witnesses, just signs of struggle and the same frozen timestamp on the dashboards, always stopping at 2:47 a.m., as if the moment of death were endlessly repeating, looping itself into the road. Locals began to say the highway needed replacements, that it could not hold the dead forever, that every soul trapped there eventually learned how to stand again, how to wait, how to lure, and that those who showed hesitation were the easiest to claim, because the highway fed on intention, on choice, on the instant a driver decided to slow down. Late one night, months after Jack vanished, a couple driving cross-country reported seeing two figures standing together near the bridge, one a woman in a burned white dress, the other a man beside her, his hands shaking, his eyes hollow, his mouth moving silently as if trying to warn them. And when the couple sped past in terror, they swore they heard a voice inside the car whisper, "You did the right thing." And for the first time in years, the road behind them felt empty, but Highway 66 did not rest. It never does, because roads like this are not haunted. They are hungry, and somewhere deep beneath the asphalt, beneath the scorched earth and forgotten wreckage, the memories of every scream, every fire, every final breath remain embedded like veins, waiting for the next traveler to arrive alone, tired, distracted, believing they're in control, believing the night is empty. And if you ever find yourself driving that road after midnight and see someone standing perfectly still in your headlights, remember this: the dead, they're not asking for help. They are offering you a choice. And once you stop, once you decide, the highway decides too.